Thanks for watching the Council in Brief. I'm Susan Kennedy. We're here with a complete wrap of all the news of the Montgomery County Council for this second week in February. We begin with the January snowfall that left more than 100,000 county residents without power for days on end. Once again, officials from PEPCO appeared before council members to answer questions about the utility's reliability. And once again, there were those same promises in response to those massive power outages.
Our citizens justify.
Council members, particularly Vice President Roger Berliner,
we are tired of the excuses.
Were upset that PEPCO CEO Joseph Rigby declined to appear at the briefing, and the full-page ad apology by the utility in the Washington Post did little to satisfy him.
I'm getting very tired of the PR blitz. I want to see performance. I want to see real commitment. It's the beginning, but quite frankly, he should have been here today speaking to our council and turning publicly and being held accountable publicly for their actions. That's what people do when they really apologize.
It's difficult when you have a utility company that's not where it needs to be.
The council hammered away at the PEPCO A-team, as they refer to themselves.
We're not where we want to be, meeting our customers' expectations.
Demanding answers as to why these storms seem to paralyze the region's power supply.
We've had this conversation. It's a Groundhog Day experience, isn't it?
You have a rate structure that virtually guarantees you a rate of return. And it's hard for me to imagine why any of this is really believable any more than your corporate willingness to accept to being the worst or nearly the worst, depending how you look at it, was totally acceptable to your corporate standards. I don't get your corporate standards, frankly.
PEPCO ranks in the bottom quartile for day-to-day reliability, and it's been there for several years. Officials briefed council members on a 6-point plan for improving that ranking, including increased tree trimming and purchasing vehicles that can get to residents quicker. It's a 5-year plan that they say they are implementing aggressively.
When we go through and we work on the feeders, we're going very aggressively to trim the trees to take care of that outage problem. We're working to improve all of the infrastructure that feeds the customers so it'll perform better both during the normal day-to-day and also during storms.
Other questions arose about the utility's rate of return. State regulations allow utilities to collect higher fees to compensate for outages.
This is a crisis that needs to be resolved now.
Councilmember Berliner thinks that money should be returned to customers.
PEPCO doesn't have the authority to pass these costs on to ratepayers. That's the job of the Maryland Public Service Commission. And my hope is that the Maryland Public Service Commission looks very carefully at determining how much ratepayers pick up and how much shareholders pick up. Because quite frankly, shareholders have fared a lot better than ratepayers have in our community. So I'm less concerned about their statements about ratepayer impact than they're getting this system right and investing in this system so that we don't have the worst system in the state, but that we have one of the best systems in the country. That's our goal. That's what we're pushing for. That's what we're hoping our Maryland Public Service Commission will insist upon.
Also this month, the council received a report from the Montgomery Organizational Reform Commission. The panel was formed last year and charged with the task of guiding the county toward creating efficient models of providing services and operations. The council heard recommendations for consolidating functions performed by the county. Council Vice President Roger Berliner is the original sponsor of the resolution.
We dealt into a number of different organizations within the county government, looking at the structure, looking at how they were operated and how we could possibly come up with some cost savings and some efficiencies in those departments. It was a tough job. I mean, when you start to dig down into the roots of the plant, sometimes you don't want to kill the plant. You have to come up with a way of bringing it forward without destroying everything.
We identified a minimum of about $30 million in savings, but we actually think the potential is much, much higher than that. Could conceivably be even hundreds of millions of dollars in savings from the organizational changes that we came up with and also the changes that we suggested in the collective bargaining process. The one thing I do want to say is we were tremendously impressed with the dedicated and talented workforce that the Montgomery County has, both both in the county government and the teachers at Montgomery County Public Schools, and we don't want to do anything to damage the wonderful support that county residents get from the workforce in Montgomery County.
The Council has received a presentation on the third edition of the School Safety and Security at a Glance report. The publication summarizes data from individual schools on things like suspension and serious incidents. And as Council members tell us, there is some good news to report.
It appears that the school system has made some giant steps in the direction of correcting a problem that council members saw last year and in previous years. Council member Andrews being a very big proponent of making sure that we address the issue of bullying and the fact that students told us that they were feeling unsafe in their school building. And so we don't believe that these issues have been completely resolved, although we see that the school system is making, an enormous effort to correct the problem.
I think it's important when we do see incidents that are reported at schools, and when some schools have higher incidents than others, to say to the schools, we're glad to see that that report is there, because I can understand that there may be some reluctance in some schools to report everything, and I want the message to go out that we want reports. We want to recognize that it's important for schools to try to achieve the most accurate reporting possible, because in order to address these issues, you first have to know that they're there and to have good data. So I want to say to those schools that had the most reported number of incidents, that's okay. We want that to be visible so that we can address it.
Well, I think we're definitely seeing some improvements in terms of the fact that we're including the category of bullying, and I think that's really important, even though I believe there's still going to be some discrepancies between what the students report and what the teachers report. But I think that, as we continue to do this, we'll get to a point where there will be, I think, more recognition and a better way to identify. But the good news is the suspension rate, and I think that's because the school system has implemented, now it's been several years, a different approach to suspension, where students are not necessarily suspended out of school. Now they get to stay in school, which means that the school has to own the students, and it gives students another opportunity to be engaged in their education, even though they may not be in the classroom, but they're still in the building.
The Council has passed a resolution urging the Maryland General Assembly to pass the Religious Freedom and Civil Marriage Protection Act during this year's legislative session. The measure will allow same-sex couples in the state of Maryland to receive marriage licenses and extend to them all state-administered legal benefits, protections, and obligations. The measure was introduced by Councilmember Nancy Florine and co-sponsored by all 8 of her colleagues.
Why should that be any different from me than it is from so many of my dear friends who have adopted children, who've owned homes together? Why would we put them in a situation where they're not able to assume a full range of legal and fiscal responsibility for each other that I have with my husband? To live with someone and be part of their lives for 20 or 30 years and not then being able to be allowed at their side in the emergency room because someone has raised this question is the kind of thing where that this law will change.
Councilmember Mark Elridge has proposed a county-wide bus rapid transit system that is currently under review by county and transportation planners. Mr. Elridge says BRT would provide faster, more efficient service than an ordinary bus line at more than half the cost of most transportation alternatives.
So I look at it as, first of all, as a transportation tool. And if you're going to have economic development, the most likely way you're going to be able to attract people is if you can demonstrate a commitment to being able to move people. And Montgomery County will become less attractive and therefore more challenging in terms of maintaining or growing any kind of tax base, particularly a commercial tax base, if we don't demonstrate that we're serious about moving people.
Under the state maintenance of effort law, local governments are required to fund their school systems at the same level as the previous year. Governments that don't provide school funding at that same level face fines and reduced state aid. However, difficult economic times has forced county officials to take a new look at how we fund education and if the maintenance of effort law needs to be changed.
We've gone way over and above maintenance of effort for the last decade, almost to $600 million. And so what we're going to be asking the legislature is to amend the law so that when economic times are as tough as they are right now, there's a trigger mechanism in the law that would allow counties a way out from underneath the law and to take away the penalty.
Members of the Transportation and Environment Committee are in the midst of working on a bill that would increase fines for violating the county sediment control law. As Councilmember Mark Elrich tells us, current civil fines aren't tough enough to deter violators.
What's happened is that increasingly the fines are treated as the cost of doing business, and they'd rather pay the fine and violate the law, pollute the water, and do that rather than pay for really doing sediment control. And my interest actually is in collecting zero fines. My interest is in creating a fine that somebody thinks, well, I'd rather, and it'll be cheaper to actually obey the law and take care of the water than it is to pay the fine. So, I mean, I'm not looking for a revenue producer, I'm looking at getting people to comply. I mean, in general, I think that in most cases, the purpose of a fine is to deter behavior, not to collect money. And that's certainly my intent here.
Poole's General Store closed its doors at the end of last year after 45 years of service. The building has stood off River Road in Seneca for more than 100 years, and the Department of Parks would like to see it stay for 100 more.
I'm the historian for the park. Are you? Yes, ma'am. Are you responsible for all of that? Partly. I'm not the graphic designer, but I help get the images. It's marvelous. Thank you very much.
My name is Jamie Coons. I'm senior historian for Montgomery County Parks. Well, the Poole store, the building that's behind me, was built in 1901 by Frederick Allnut. He was a local merchant here in Seneca. He bought the land, 3.5 acres from Wilson Shafaley, and when he bought the property, that included the Upton Darby house, which is directly behind the store. But he built the store in 1901. He operated the store until 1915 when he died, and it was a general store. When he passed away, his son-in-law, Guy Allnut, took over the family operations.
We're dealing with some, we have a lot of issues here we need to resolve. Got some structural integrity issues.
Oh, I'm sure.
And then in 1965, Raymond Poole took over the store, and him and his wife Billy and their children operated the store until last year, December 2010.
Because of health problems, Raymond and Billy Poole closed the store for good on December 31st. Folks got together to reminisce.
But this place was part of my childhood, and then when we moved back to the area, it was served our gardening needs.
When I was 14, I used to hitch my pony up to this hitching post outside the store, go in and get a sandwich.
This was a wall, and that was the back room. And that was the back room, right cards. The walls can only talk, right?
It's a shame. There's a piece of American history.
One of the folks said it's just a shame that it's not still open, and I agree with him. I think it's as soon as we can get this store back the way people remember it, will be a good thing for the community. In the meantime, we have an interim operation providing feed for supplying the community with the products they need to get their farms supplied during the winter months as we determine the ultimate fate of the property and who's going to move in here next.
The Pooles had leased this property from the Montgomery County Department of Parks since 1976.
Hey, how you doing today?
The Department of Parks had an open house on January 29th to find a new tenant for this historic site.
What's that? My name is Matt Markoff from Caleva Outdoors.
This is commercial.
That's the commercial, and this is residential. We're trying to figure out how Caleva can help facilitate to keep this the Poole store, the general store that helps out the farmers in this area and is a benchmark for agricultural community. And I think if you can get the people that are selling the horse feed, then you can probably sell some stuff off the shelves.
We'd like to see it remain a store and maybe have another 110 years worth of history.
It's a chance for a change, and now that it's going to change, you guys will accept it. So let's go on and take the next step forward.
Well, that does it for this edition of the Council in Brief. We'll be back again next month with a full wrap of all the Council's news. For County Cable Montgomery, I'm Susan Kennedy. Thanks for watching.